So in doing that, we are just honored to have colleagues from 4 different districts talking about their math implementation and implementation of ELA materials. Typically in the secondary realm, but everybody will have a chance to talk about that, about their work. So here in our next slide, while we're toggling between getting everybody in and making sure we have all our participants set up, use this chat to share your name, where you're coming from, your role, and that way participants can see who's in the room and who they get to see today. So thank you for joining us. Yeah, shalom, Bryn. Important time of year. Great. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Wonderful. Thank you. I will give you any language, exactly. Greetings. Sego is Ganikahahe, which is the Mohawk language. Sego. So we have some amazing districts here representing Delaware: Christina Red Clay, Caesar Rodney, Cape Henlopen, and I have the great honor in being able to work with each of these amazing educators alongside your state leaders, Carrie and Maria. And something that's very important to your leadership team is that there's this notion of not only shared responsibility or accountability, but just collective efficacy, that you're working together to build each other's capacity. And that really is at the heart of today's session. So when we think about what's happening in the state of Delaware, you're going to hear about their district's process of high quality instructional materials implementation, how they're thinking about monitoring student learning progress and proficiency, what that looks like, because you can have policy all day long, but until you're really thinking about how that implementation component fits in, you really come to this third bullet, which is what are the conditions for collaboration? What kinds of pieces are in play to support multilingual learners? You'll hear some emerging themes. And so we'll also open up an opportunity for you, the participants, to ask your colleagues about things that are arising for them, but also for their advice. What do you think would work well in your districts, and how you can replicate their expertise? So make sure that you drop any questions that you have in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat as well, and we are here to support each other. So we're going to start off with the Caesar Rodney School District. I just have to preface this with just amazing work that they have been doing, particularly with the English Learner Success Forum partnership that happened this year. And in that, we had 6 districts meet over 5 sessions. Cape Henlopen was part of that too. And some of the work that came out of this was so powerful, really beyond I had the honor of participating as well and helping to facilitate it. And some great learning has come from that. So each of these school districts really brings a unique perspective to that work. And the ELSF, English Learner Success Forum, work was specifically around multilingual learners and mathematics curriculum. So I will hand it over to your, oops, I have this other deck here. I will hand it over to you, CR, as you introduce yourselves, and then I will get the other deck up so you can have your slides ready. So I hand it over to Caesar Rodney.
Hi, everyone. I am Jamie Campbell, the math resource teacher for Caesar Rodney School District.
I am Kim Corbeil, the supervisor of instruction for the Caesar Rodney School District.
I'm Oribel McFinn Mora. I'm the language acquisition coordinator at CR. Hello, everybody.
We keep looking for our other counterpart, Sean Sealand, who is a math coach at one of our elementary schools, Stokes Elementary. He has not been able to sign on, but he could have gotten involved with things that happen in schools. But the reason we have him is Stokes Elementary in our district is the elementary that kind of houses most of our multilingual learners. Something they started this year. Was it this year or last year? This year.
Well,
I'm not sure
mhm.
if it's this year or last year, but they primarily have all of our elementary ML learners. So when we started this process with Melissa and the state, we decided to put all of our effort right now into that school because we already have teachers vested in how can we help our ML learners. Is there anything, Oribel, you'd like to add to that?
I would say that we have a lot of good things going on in our district. It is no secret that many districts, ours included, has been adopting new curriculum, and we now have a fantastic curriculum for math. And I think with that being said, though it can be overwhelming, as we all know, to launch a new curriculum at any grade level, it's also a great opportunity to sort of do it right. And I think to just piggyback off of what Kim said, we see this as an opportunity to make sure that we are involving and targeting all of our students. We've had MLLs in our schools forever. Right. So I think we just know that with this new curriculum, we do not want anyone to not be well serviced. And when it comes to the school that we selected, which is Stokes Elementary, like Kim said, the teachers there are vested into making sure that we provide the best teaching for our MLLs. And it is just really exciting to sort of collaborate to make this happen.
So
Jamie?
Melissa, we don't have slides, so do you want us to just work through the questions, the discussion questions?
There they are. Can you see them, Jamie?
Oh, okay. Oh, these are our other slides. Okay.
So one of the things they emphasized in the ELSF PD was really diving into the math curriculum that you have. What resources are within what high quality instructional material you are implementing. And that is where our focus really shifted on. We've been unpacking, teachers are in survival mode of looking at the math curriculum. Let's dive deep as a small group. Let's dive deep to see they have these language routines. What does that look like? What does that feel like? You know, we read the words, but what does that really mean? And so that's when this group decided to dive deeper. And with that, we looked into lesson studies.
We need to go. Okay, so our process for this, what we decided to do was to take 2 teachers from Stokes Elementary School and do a very comprehensive lesson study with them. We met with one teacher for a half a day in the morning and then the other teacher for a half day afternoon. And we worked through an entire lesson from start to finish, really emphasizing every key component of the lesson, but also really digging deep into the language demands and the language objectives, as well as the embedded language supports within our curriculum that we have not really previously tapped into yet because we are still learning the curriculum in general. And from there, we had some real deep conversations about the specific needs of our ML students, but also all of the students in the classroom. It really became a learning moment for us that what we do and implement for our ML students, the benefits of those are universal and really just are for the better of everybody in the classroom. We followed up the lesson planning by visiting the classroom the day that the lesson was going to be taught. So we went back either the next day or the day after that and watched the lesson implementation. There were at times when myself or the building level coach did some jumping in and some co-teaching, but we went around, we worked with students, we were familiar with the lesson and the math content because we had planned together. And then we even had time at the end of that to look at data. We collected some data from students to look at the data and debrief with the teachers and kind of reflect on the lesson, but also pretty much the whole process from start to finish. We did that in, I believe it was December, and then it was such a powerful process and experience for all of us that we decided to replicate it and do it again. And we expanded our group to include the building level administrators. Melissa was part of that with us, and Kyle Hill from our district, which his official title, do we know? He's a special education resource teacher. And from there, we've decided that it has such an impact that we are now working on creating a system to scale this out to other schools and all grade levels next school year.
Their work is so powerful to watch in action. They have teachers at the table, coaches, directors, individuals from specialists in mathematics and specialists in multilingual learner and English learner education. And what was so interesting to watch in this process that this team is describing is this notion that we're all coming with these levels of expertise, but we're coming with a different approach. So everybody during this session, the planning session that they're describing here, and also the work that they did as part of the ELSF collaborative, was coming to the table in almost in a level playing field, if you will, right? Everybody's new to the curriculum, essentially, and looking at it in this way, where you're looking at the language demands, you're looking at the content demands, and everybody had to come to this work with specific lens and then a collaborative lens. So to watch this take place was so fascinating, and it's something that you'll see throughout. And the power with this team really, and Arbel has described this before, and Kim as well, not really knowing where this was going to go, right? Like just being open, and there's like something to say about being vulnerable in these experiences and just learning from one another. So I know that I'm coming in from from the side here saying this, but it was just very, very powerful to watch, and it made the high quality instructional materials come alive in a way that, as Jamie was just describing, is going to start replicating itself. And that last meeting that they had with everybody there, I mean, there's really high interest. So I'm not sure if you picked up on it. I'm just going to try to synthesize after each group, but they had so many people from different levels of the system, right? Everybody at the table with new learning taking place and really centering multilingual learners. So that they went above and beyond by creating their own lesson analysis protocol, and they really thought about the way to dig into this was to work with teachers, create samples and examples, and then scale from there. So,
And if I can just say, it did build confidence in the teachers. They just from lesson study 1 to lesson study 2, just from December to March, how much stronger and confident they felt when they came to the table to do that second lesson study, and what they had already tried doing without us. That was also very powerful.
Beautiful, very powerful, exponential, if you will. Did we capture everything on this slide, Jamie? This is kind of what you were speaking from.
Yeah, pretty much everything minus the PL that we put out that was open to every teacher, not just the Stokes teachers, that was specifically around the math language routines within our curriculum.
Beautiful. I invite others to jump in on this, but some of the conditions that I was able to observe during this time with them are that we already mentioned vulnerability, but this opportunity to collaborate around something. So it wasn't just like strategies, you're collaborating around the what, which is the content, the curriculum, all of the components that are so necessary for all our multilingual learners. And then you had all the experts like Oribel and all your math experts, Jamie, Kimberly, everybody sitting together. Sean, who's he's not on the call right now, but he's an integral part of this. He's the coach at the school, instructional coach, like coming together, like we've got to solve this. Another condition is you can't make this happen without leadership. The administration at the school is it's dedicated to the thing that surfaced the most, which was teachers were saying, how can we do better? How can we do better? This is a condition that's cultivated over time, and they're coming to this, every teacher in that school comes to the table and asks, what can we do differently? Because we know that there's a need here and we want to do better. So that responsibility, that ownership, that opportunity to ask for help when needed was something that it's palpable when you are joining their team. So when we talk about conditions and factors, it's really about what are those enabling conditions that help high quality instructional materials be implemented thoughtfully, and as Kathy Kelly would say, a skillful implementation.
I just wanted to add, Melissa, and for everyone here, that we, or at least I would not say that we sort of have a very specific plan moving forward, right? Or we feel that we are going to solve all of the challenges that our students face as they're learning the curriculum. But I think we feel that we are in a good spot where we know that we are all committed to doing our best to make sure that all of our students have access to high quality instructional materials. And I think we feel pretty confident that we are going to continue to work together to improve any process or tools that we are going to be using and sharing with our educators and collaborating with our educators at Stokes and hopefully all of our schools to make sure that we are doing right by our MLLs.
Thank you so much, Caesar Rodney. I'm sure there will be many other questions that that come up, and these are just a few of the team members. I mean, we're talking like everybody came to the table to learn from this, and it really is expanding and moving to broaden their work. So major appreciation and kudos to all of you. And let's hear from Red Clay. So I'd elbow bump you if we were in the room, but good job.
Hello. Excuse me,
Hello.
sorry. I have a little touch of the allergies in my throat, so I sound a little rough. I apologize. My name is Michelle Bartlett. I am a multilingual learner instructional coach in Red Clay. My colleagues are going to introduce themselves as well in the beginning before we share our slides. So I will hand it over to them to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Natasha Diokno, and I'm an MLL instructional coach at Red Clay as well.
And I'm Ann Anastasia. I'm also a MLL instructional coach in Red Clay.
Okay, we are ready for our next slide. Thank you. All right, so Carol Beck is our MLL supervisor. She is on the call, I believe. She is not going to speak. We are going to present for our group. You can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so we began in the beginning of this school year. Our secondary teachers adopted 2 new ELA curriculums, ARC for middle school and Odell. Oh, go back, you're good. ARC for middle school and Odell for high school, which led to discussions around collaboration with MLL teams. So we created collaborative conversations led to planned cohorts of our secondary ELA teachers, MLL teachers, technology coaches, and our MLL coaches. Throughout the school year, we met several times to discuss best practices for teaching all learners with a special focus on planning exemplary lessons using the curriculum materials as intended by the authors. Our district is next planning to continue this collaboration with our ELA department, reflecting on the impact that our work has had on our students' achievement and to continue making enhancements. Next slide, please.
So we began with some departmental conversations at the district level, primarily ELA, MLL, and technology. And then we looked into which secondary teachers from ELA and also some special ed dual certified teachers would be good members of our cohorts, and we invited them to come to several different meetings throughout the year. At our first meeting, we looked at, we had picked a lesson for them to plan around that would be upcoming, that they could then implement later on in their classrooms. We provided them with some ideas for scaffolding, and we also looked at the curriculum resources and available multilingual learner resources that we already had. For our next meeting, the teachers had delivered and implemented that lesson, and then we brought them back to meet with us, debrief, and find out what had gone well, what we needed to tweak, what enhancements needed to be made. And then we started preparing a second lesson for them to implement and reflect on. We came back, reflected on that lesson, and the teachers met together with us to us meeting the multidisciplinary teams at the district level to plan a PD where they would discuss their process and the materials and resources that had been developed for the curriculum materials. You can go on to the next slide, please.
So we looked at a lesson and searched for ways to add scaffolds to the lesson. We wanted to make sure the teachers could model their thinking so they could share their thinking and how they got to the answer for the question with their students. We discussed ways to make the text accessible to all learners. So we started off by highlighting and adding bold print and emojis and icons to the keywords and key vocabulary. We wanted to incorporate pictures to provide visual examples of the word. And we also used the snipping tool to highlight key passages and key components of the text that we wanted to highlight for students to return back to the text. So they would know that they could always return to the text and look at the vocabulary embedded in the text to answer the questions. Next slide, please.
Sorry, had to unmute. So this slide is an example of how we added supports to existing curricular resources. After some suggestions and requests from our teachers, I added images to help students recognize what they needed to write about in this graphic organizer. I also bolded key vocabulary words and added spaces for students to add models for each section. This was requested by the teachers in the secondary classrooms. Some of them had piloted this curriculum last year, so they had some experience and they knew what they were looking for within those tools that already existed in Odell. And they wanted to enhance them. They asked for a way that we could add the model spaces so that they could have students have one sheet of paper rather than multiple spots to look for a model example. So just taking what already existed and adding some images, bolding some key vocabulary words, and creating the space for the model examples just to enhance the curriculum that was already existing. Next slide, please.
So another way that we enhanced the existing curriculum was by, for this example, from the activity of reading the Federalist #1 as part of the 10th grade Hamilton unit in the Odell curriculum, we just added some actual annotation to the how to annotate. So by adding underlines, asterisks, and brackets and of circles, we give the students a better understanding of what they're supposed to do in their own text. And then the teacher can explain and model using the text, but they already have an idea from this of how they're expected to annotate the text. For some of them, it's not something that they're very familiar with doing. Next slide, please.
So some of the district bright spots and successes were cross-curricular collaborations. We have ongoing group discussions about the diverse needs of all of our learners. The students have access to the grade level curriculum materials for everyone. And also this process allowed us to highlight the wealth of knowledge from our teachers. And the process also served as a model for continued collaboration between the MLL team and other content specialists. That's all we have. Thank you.
Wow. I don't know if you're following the chat at all, but I'm trying to capture some of these terms that are surfacing and this whole notion of cross-curricular collaboration around these concrete, important tools like high-quality instructional materials. So I also really appreciate what you just said, Natasha. Actually, it's been echoed throughout all, but lifting the expertise of teachers as well, right? This is a fundamental tenet of high quality instructional materials, that they're there and they still have to be unpacked. I think the CR team talked about it, like really wanted to understand more deeply what the demands are, both content and language demands. So Kate Henlopen, you're up. Thank you. Oh, big shout out, Red Clay, elbow bumping you through the screen. So cheers. Thank you so much. Well done.
I'm going to start and introduce myself because then I want to celebrate the team that has really done this work. My name is Dr. Hazard. I'm one of the assistant principals at Cape Henlopen High School, and I am proud to send it over to Janine McGinley And then she'll send it over to the rest of the team as we explain the work we've done this year.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janine McGinley. I am the high school math specialist in the district.
I'm Bryn Baruch, and I'm the MLL specialist in the district.
And I'm Kristen Carmen. I'm the secondary math specialist for the district. And I think I'm going to just, oh, go ahead. All right, there we are again. Okay, I'm just going to get us started before I hand it over to Janine. So as I mentioned, I'm the secondary math specialist for the district, and I'm just going to give a little background knowledge on our math curriculum for secondary. So we currently have the same HQIM, which is Envision Math, in all of our secondary schools. Our middle schools are in the first year of adoption, and our high school is in the second full year of adoption. So having the same curriculum in all our secondary schools allows us to create consistent experiences for students between classrooms and grade levels, and it also more easily allows us to facilitate meaningful content-based discussions around across grade levels with specialists and administrators. So Envision Math does provide instructional supports, which are embedded in the teacher editions that promote development of language modalities in mathematics. And they kind of, I don't want to say single out because it includes all students, but there's kind of three buckets, I guess you could say these fall into. So these supports are for all students as they learn new mathematical language during the year. It also promotes language development for struggling readers and writers who are below grade level in acquiring written language, and for multilingual learner students who may be at various levels of English language proficiency. So in our current space of very early adoption, we are now working to support teachers to implement the curriculum with fidelity and intentionality. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janine, who's going to talk about some things she's doing in our high school.
Okay, so we have a lot of support. Can you go back one? I'm sorry. So we have a lot of support in place for our MLL students. So a lot of our classes have a push-in support teacher who goes in for maybe a half hour at a time and before I even continue, I want to say that I am the math specialist. So I do work with these students, but in the mathematical way. So I'll talk about that in a second. And I'm also very new to this, so I'm learning as I go. But so the MLL support, they definitely do help them with the language in the class and making sure that they understand the concepts. We also have specific classes for students called ELD, English Language Development classes, that the students will go to in addition to their regular classes. So where I come in as the math specialist, I provide intervention to these students by either pulling them out of class, usually during advisory, or I push into their classes. And what I find has been the most helpful to enhance the curriculum is to scaffold for them and provide a lot of visual support. And like I said, being that I'm the math person, I can really take the concepts that they're learning in class and provide some sort of way for them to see it, whether it's me actually, doing moves with my hands, or I use Desmos a ton. So I found that I need to write Desmos a thank you letter at the end of the year because I use it constantly. And when I pull up my screen and I show them things on there, I do feel that I see it click a lot for them. When I pull students from advisory and it's a smaller group setting, I find that they're a lot more comfortable speaking to me in English. And what I've done is I've worked with these students in describing their process in English. And sometimes, they'll do both in their language and in English, but the idea is to get them comfortable, and I've tried recording them so that they can hear it back. But like I said, I find that that's been the most helpful when I have the opportunity to pull them in a small group. When I push into classes and I'm working with students, I don't have them do that. So I'm trying to think what else. The students that I do pull, we have looked at their marking period grades, and then we've created an assessment that helps me determine whether or not it's a language issue or if it's a skill in math that they're missing, or skills, I should say. And then once I get those scores, I can determine whether or not I can work with them on some intervention. And that's how I get my students.
Can you do our slides now?
Yes.
So I guess I'll take this from you now, Janine, because I feel like that will make you happy. But some of the ways that we assess their learning, other than what Janine said, was also, just looking at the access scores and the domains and seeing, like, really digging in to see, is there a specific domain that we can leverage more within math classes, and then making sure that, all the content teachers also understand how to read those scores. And then can you go to our last slide, please, Melissa? So this is really kind of, I think, where the work has landed us. I want to start by also taking 2 steps back and saying, Melissa, we really appreciated the classes from the state, because the first piece of that was doing some classroom visits. And I got to do those with Kristen. And that was just a really powerful piece, because we really got to go in and see the reality. So where are we starting at, and what is the best things what are the tools that we can use to leverage and to have impact, like, right away? What are some quick hits? And then what are some long range goals? So we do have a long range goal. We really loved when we got to sort of dig into a lesson, and the Envision lessons are extremely long. So what we noticed is we can identify which pieces of the lesson may be more MLL friendly, may have more strategies that really will get students engaged and get students talking to each other and get students talking about math. And so we're trying to find those opportunities to leverage activities that are MLL friendly within the content, and sort of identify them and identify language and content objectives. So we've got this big summer project that we've kind of come up with for a moving forward piece. So we're going to really dig in to try to frame those objectives, and to make sure that we can leverage the curriculum in a way that keeps it as the authors intended, but also provides the scaffolds that are needed for our language learners, especially our high school and 9th graders. We have a ton of newcomers there. And then we're going to also identify and emphasize how lessons can engage more collaboration for students, like peer-to-peer collaboration and student talk, and allow students to have those low-stake interactions rather than having to sort of just raise a hand in class and go for it. They're having low stake interactions first, so then they can feel more comfortable, and then maybe feel that they can have a high stake interaction by raising their hand and presenting. So that's sort of where the work is going. And we really appreciate Melissa and how she's supported our work and been our cheerleader. You all know in this room probably that she is the best cheerleader and is always in everyone's corner. And so I'll toss it back to you, Melissa.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Sorry. I wanted to cheer the team on a little bit more than they even celebrated themselves. They already began the process of some lesson analysis and with using the lab tool. It is time consuming. I think that's one of the challenges, right? But I think the success in that is that you really get that deep dive into the academic language for students, what's needed, and what kind of supports are needed, how to celebrate and engage their L1. All of that is a process of that part of that process for the lab. And I think it's really important that that be shared and looked at across the state. I think it's a really important tool for us. And I also want to give Janine, if she's okay with this, one more moment in the limelight. And the reason I want to do that is because this is actually my first year as an assistant principal at Cape Henlopen High School. And so working with Janine, this is my first year working with her. Many things I've asked of her. And I think one of my biggest celebrations, and I hope hers, is that through this process, she tried some different things. And I'll let her share that story with you. But I I want to celebrate that moment so that we all know that even if this experience is not always ours that we've had in the past, that it's, diving in, sharing your expertise can be a great thing for that. So Janine, maybe I've said too much, but go ahead.
Thank you. Which situation is it again? Is it the one where?
Just that essentially one day we were talking with one of our MLL teachers who was also a part of this work. And she just said to Janine, hey, Janine, can you go into a classroom? I need help and I can't get to that classroom for those students. And it was a newer experience.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, and like I said, I feel like I'm new I've been teaching math for 18 years, but this is my first time with MLLs. But I found that a lot of them, as you know, just want to feel comfortable. And if they don't feel comfortable, then they're not going to, it's just like any student. So there's one student that I feel like we've had a little bit of trouble with this year, and just he shuts off and doesn't really want to participate, or won't take out a notebook at all in class. So when I push into a class and he's in there, I found that working with other students that are around him has helped him not look like he's in the spotlight and needing any guidance or help, because he just kind of wants to fit in, like he wants to be part of, the culture of the other students. And so when I was working with another student, the proximity of just where I was, I think helped him participate more. So I was to the left of a student and he was next to that student. And when I was talking to the student next to him, he started looking and then would talk and started chiming in. And then I just slid a paper to him, but didn't say anything. And he just started to write it down. Just like that tiny little thing that happened, I felt like was just such a success. And I think that's what you're talking about, right, Jess?
I'm just celebrating you and diving into the work, and I enjoyed that story and other ones I've heard too. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But
If
I'll
you
take all
haven't
your suggestions.
Yes, if you haven't heard it already, there's this emerging theme that bringing the expertise together and building each other's capacity is really, oftentimes in the fields you'll hear things like, but what do we do for our multilingual learners, right? This is it. You're looking at it. We've already heard from 3 districts with their expertise in building that collaborative nature around, something so valuable as high quality instructional materials, and with skillful implementation, intentional fidelity, right? Knowing the learners that you have in front of you, that is such an asset that you have in Delaware. And you're seeing, I can't say it enough, this is really cutting edge material right here. And you're really bringing forward and living in all of the nuanced pieces and willing to take these risks for your learners. That is just a theme that continues to arise. And the support of Kristen, Carmen, and Janine, and Jessica, and Bryn, all of these brilliant minds together, helping to work through this. Simultaneously, we're just about to jump in and hear from Christina. Simultaneous to this work with high quality instructional materials, every single team has talked about their system, right? We don't do this work aside from the system. It's how does this work help center the system and really help to heal it, right? Because we're in a time where we need to be really intentional about the way we approach high quality instruction and high quality learning for all learners, and it's essential for multilingual learners. Kate Henlopen, elbow bump through the screen. Thank you for sharing. Incredible thinkers. All right, we've got, oh, hold on. Before we do that, I'm gonna hand it over to our colleagues. Wait, yes, Christina. Did I lose you? Amber?
We're here.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're
great.
here.
Sorry.
Waiting for our slide.
Wonderful. Okay. Here we go.
All right, so thank you. Hello, everybody. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing this year with our new ELA curriculum, which is ARC, and our MLL program. Melissa, you can go ahead to the next slide. I'm Amber Herrera, and I'm the administrator for our multilingual learner program in Christina.
And I'm Ann Parry. I'm the MLL instructional coach, and I work predominantly with middle and high schools.
And we did just want to take a minute to recognize some team members that even though they weren't here with us today, they really were a big support and participants and collaborators in all this work that we are going to talk about. So Tabitha Bendel, who's our ELA curriculum specialist, we've been working with her over the past 2 years on most of the things that you're going to hear today. We also have an ARC coach that is working with us specifically to support our MLLs, Colleen Reyes, all of our ELA and MLL co-teachers from our 8 middle and high schools, and then our district and building administrators. We're going to be talking a lot about an ELA and MLL cohort, and we really started having this conversation as we were looking at the Delaware design and trying to think how we could truly implement this guiding principle, which is up there on the screen for you, and really focused in on the words all educators. And then how we would be able to really support all educators and shifting the mindsets of not only our content teachers, but our MLL teachers, our administrators, our coaches, all of these staff members in our buildings, that it's not just one person or one position's job to support language development, but it was really all of our jobs to support language development throughout the school day. So we really looked at this mindset shift. Previously, we've done a lot of professional development for our content teachers, but it was a lot of like, here's one PD for the year, here's another PD for the year. So really to make that mindset shift start to occur, we need it to be in front of teachers on this ongoing professional learning journey that includes a lot of collaboration and conversation between a team that's all working towards a common goal. You can go ahead to the next slide.
So at the beginning of this work, we had to think about what was missing and what we already had in place. And prior to this collaboration, we had ELD services that were predominantly self-contained classes and push-in services. MLL teachers generally had difficulty providing supports in content areas because they didn't know the material in advance. There wasn't consistency across classrooms. And we kind of were presented this unique opportunity as ARC was rolling out. And we had a new ELA specialist who began to look at the materials. And we looked at the IRLA, we looked at, which is the independent reading level assessment, and the MLL guide. And we decided to create a plan to really fill in some of these missing pieces. We decided we needed a team that would include admin, a building admin, and district leadership, but also representatives from the ELA department and the MLL department in each school. And that we would need to really take time and develop knowledge about the materials. And with Carrie Knight, we talked about a unit planning template to really start to merge some of our knowledge about the ELD standards with some of the ARC units. And then finally, really what a barrier that we perceived was the schedule. How do we get the correct balance of students in these ELA classrooms? And how do we create a co-teaching environment that also has a co-planning period? And so this, we can go to the next slide. So this is how our language instruction and support cohort was born. We had an ELA teacher and an MLL teacher from each of our middle and high schools. And we brought them together over the 2022-23 school year this year. And we're working towards having this collaborative community of teachers across the district who are working towards these common goals. And together developing a system of supports that address the linguistic needs of their students. An example from a classroom a few weeks ago, we had a new student from Russia join us, and one of the teachers said, "Oh, I think he's a beginner." And the ELA teacher said, "I think we should give the ERLA assessment together and learn more about who he is as a learner." And we did that, and we discovered that he is at a 3rd grade reading level. He already has a lot of academic language. He was just shy and in a new country and not really showing us in those first couple of days what he could do. And so really having this system in place where there's a collaboration in the school amongst teachers, and people can leverage their knowledge of the materials, it really leads to knowing more about students, which then leads to a lot of opportunities given to students using these materials. We, gathered together to really develop formative and summative assessments that address students' needs. And we dove into the materials to really find all the embedded supports and make sure we were leveraging those and having discussions as the year went along. And so on the next slide, you can see an example of a unit planning template that we developed along with Carrie Knight. We used hers and kind of tweaked it for the purposes of ARC. But you can see kind of an example of how you take the unit and start to break it down and backwards plan and really, leverage key language uses. And then we further broke it down and talked about language forms and functions. And it really helped target language instruction in these units. And you can go to the next slide.
And so, like we said, this has really been a 2-year project that we've been working on. So there's been many successes and challenges along the way. And we chose this picture, but we were joking and said there should be an arrow running right into the wall because we definitely experienced that as well. So we couldn't always get around the wall. But Ann and I really have kind of keeps, reaching out to each other when we do run into that wall, and we are support for one another. We are support for the members of the team. And, you can only laugh at things that don't go right until you can figure out how to make them better. So 2 of the successes that we really did want to highlight, though, are the alignment to the WIDA framework. So, we've talked about the WIDA ELD standards with our ESL teacher. They have that big 300-page book that we look through, and everyone knows they can go print out all the information. But this year is the first year that we had ELA teachers and ESL teachers together in a room looking at a assignment that was coming up in a content area and really seeing the language features and functions of that assignment, and then how we can support students to demonstrate mastery or understanding of that standard. So that was something we were really excited to see. The other thing was we had a very detailed professional learning plan. We were able to meet with our teams every single month. And I really do think that ongoing professional learning was a great way for us to continue to bring this to everyone's forefront of thinking. We were able to dive into a lot of the actual lessons that were being planned, and it was really great to have the teachers share with one another. ARC was also a great support in this. Our MLL coach from ARC was able to model a lot of small group conferencing for us. So that just helped support the teachers as well, so that they really understood what those conferences could look like. And the other thing we did was Anne created a coaching tracker. And really this was just to help organize ourselves. You know, a lot of times we think, well, we have 8 secondary schools, so we think we've been to them all equal amount of times, but this was really a way for us to say like, oh, like we've been to this school 3 times this month, but this school we've only been to once. So we really were trying to keep track and making sure that we were supporting each school equally. And then we also were able to share notes through that coaching tracker, so everybody knew what everyone else was doing. And then we were all able to help with follow-up as needed. There are definitely some challenges, and some challenges that we expect will continue for next year. Scheduling is always a challenge. Really, we wanted to create these strong co-teaching relationships, and part of that is co-planning. For those of you in middle and high schools, you know that scheduling, you know, is difficult to begin with, and then to make sure that people have common planning periods can also sometimes be a challenge. So we've really been working very closely with our district administrators. We have a scheduling team. We've been working with our ESL teachers to really make sure everybody's on the same page for what this should look like as we move forward. We still anticipate, you know, that there will be some challenges, but we're hoping that we will have that time for our teams to truly collaborate. The other big challenge that we kind of ran into was in the beginning was materials and just access to materials. If we're asking MLL teachers to co-teach in an ELA classroom, then they should have access to all the materials that the ELA teacher has, which seems very simple. But, you know, like we needed to make sure our MLL teachers had access to School Pace, which is ARC's online platform, so that they could access the ERLA, they could access the ERLA toolkits, and they could track student growth in there. We also needed to make sure that they had access to the book bins. On one of our slides, you could see the different colored book bins that were down at the bottom, but we needed to make sure that the right bins matched the students that were in the classroom. So we talked a lot about getting to know our students, but we needed to know who our students were so that we could get them the correct materials to support their development in English along with their academic language development. So again, this was in collaboration with our ELA curriculum specialist, but we worked really hard to get everyone access to our online materials, and was printing out toolkits and hand delivering them to buildings. And we were borrowing and changing and adding as many book bins as we could to these ELA MLL cohort classrooms. You can go ahead to the next slide.
So some of the lessons that we learned this year was to really celebrate our small wins instead of focusing on what was not going well. Really, if we look back at the entire journey from where we started to where we are now, we're in a dramatically different place, and we've built a lot of capacity in our ELA teachers and in our MLL teachers' ability to collaborate. I think there's a lot of relationships that have formed in schools because of this cohort that will carry on in different ways. And we're kind of contributing to this collective knowledge in schools about our students. You know, I think that we really spent a long time acknowledging that each school is different. Even though this is one program, ARC is one program, and the ERLA creates this consistency, each school had its own individual challenges with scheduling or with, you know, the composition of students in the classroom. And so this model really helped us adjust and acknowledge the unique situations in schools. In retrospect, we probably would have less meetings because we realized that the collaboration was happening in their classroom. As soon as we got it up and running, they had a common planning period and they were doing the work and reaching out with questions, and they didn't need as many touch points as we had provided. But it absolutely, you know, I think for moving forward, we learned that creating that collaborative structure in the school itself is really important for the work. You know, and I think really one of the strengths and the lessons that we learned was that leveraging district and building leadership in this process and getting buy-in prior to moving forward with the process really helped us get through some of those barriers and jump the walls sometimes. We really partnered with each building's leadership to figure out how to make this work. And then the district leadership would support us, including Amber, who was amazing at every turn. It was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. She was there to, you know, kind of say, okay, this is how we can move forward. And I think, you know, we really existed, like Melissa was talking about, existing in the reality of our system. We can wishful think, we can talk about theory, but when you actually look at who the teachers are, what resources you have, and then pull those existing resources and leverage them, I think it affects students right away. And so I really think staying in that reality of that the school and the system that we have was all the difference in this work. And we can go to the next slide.
And so really just to wrap up, this is kind of where we're headed, and you can see it's a very curvy road and there's lots of stops ahead. But we really are trying to take as much teacher feedback from this year as we can for our cohort group, to make sure that as we grow and we're adding 2 new teachers from every building next year in our second cohort group, that we really address the needs of the teachers and we hear how things went this year and are really intentional about the changes that we're making for next year. So that, like Ann said, like, you know, we do meet a lot, but we want to make sure that those meetings are meaningful for the people that are attending them. The next thing that we're really looking at, again, is refining those scheduling practices. As I said before, we've been working with everybody that we can think of to really get a process in place and sharing scheduling ideas and sharing the different types of services that are available for students and how students should be selected, you know, to determine which type of service they should be receiving. How we shouldn't be just looking at one data point, which is access, but we should be looking at multiple data points so that we can really get to know our students and provide them the supports that they need in their classrooms. The other thing is just the continued collaboration. I think we talk to our ELA department pretty much every day. Those lines of communication have really been opened, and it's great. Like, we're sharing ideas, we're asking them questions, they're asking us questions. You know, we've really dug into the ARC materials to learn as much as we can about them. And I'll say the same for our ELA department. Like, they've really learned a lot about how to support MLLs. So that collaboration that we have has really been important. And we're hoping, as we talk about expanding to other content areas, to really carry that over into our math cohort, which is going to begin next year. We are also in the group of districts that are participating in the ELSF trainings with the state. So we are moving into supporting our MLLs in math next year. And then we'll begin planning for science and social studies the following year. So really just trying to keep this momentum of how we're supporting not only our students, but our educators to really support academic language development and our students as they move through their middle and high school years.
Wow, Christina, woo, woo. Amazing. Thank you both, Amber and Ann. You're hearing it here first, everyone. These interdepartment collaborations around high quality instructional materials, it's very powerful when the work is targeted and you're centering your multilingual learners. It's just these conditions are replicable, they are livable, they are alive in front of you today in this session. So it's really powerful work that you've been sharing, and thank you so much for your thorough and thoughtful presentation, Christina, school district, and everyone. And if you haven't picked up on it already, you're looking at a systemic approach to implementing high quality instructional materials. It's so amazing to hear that there are challenges, but every single time challenges were presented, you were talking about teams working together to leverage each other's expertise to work with those challenges. And those challenges quickly, as Anne was mentioning, become successes. And that is where we have to live right now. And one takeaway that was really powerful too, thinking of throughout all of them, but also like, you already have plans of where you're going with this. And each of you have kind of touched on it, but what are your plans? And we're going to open it up to the group here. What are your plans for, or how are you monitoring progress and proficiency for multilingual learners? That's a question that's come up for others in the group. And then also, as you're answering that, anybody can from the school districts here can respond to that. Participants, what questions do you have for these panelists, right? Whether it's around advice or whether it's around something specific that you heard, this is also an opportunity to ask them questions as well. But let's start with, how are you planning to monitor, or how are you monitoring progress and proficiency for your multilingual learners?
I can start, and Anne, please jump in as well. But so with the ERLA, there is a lot of online ways that you can track growth and progress throughout the different reading levels. So we've been working with our ESL teachers a lot so that while they're doing their small group conferencing, they have that up and they're tracking how students are moving throughout that level. So there's different power goals that students can be assigned so that you're able to, really focus on the specific of that reading level so that you can hopefully help them move through to the next level. And then sorry, go ahead, Anne.
No, I just wanted to add that, in our next training, we're actually talking about improving our accuracy of where the students are at and tracking their growth. Because we're at the point in the year where we should be seeing that jump in their ERLA level. And I think that improving the level's accuracy and really diving into those resources and getting a more accurate picture of the individual student's skills is the strength of ARC and the ERLA tool. But this year has really been a journey for both the ELA and MLL teachers learning those materials. So as they get better at using the tool, I think we will see a better tracking of the progress. But we are seeing correlations to our iReady scores and the cohort classes in terms of growth. So I think we will see we have a lot of data points that we are going to be collecting so that we can use that moving forward as justification for this expanding.
And I think the other just data point that we're interested to pull in is our access scores from this year to see if that support really did correlate over into our access scores.
Amazing. Anyone else want to jump in on that? And we would also like to open it to participants as well. Any questions that are coming up for you or anything that you would like to hear more about? And as individuals are thinking about those questions to ask, we'll help you. I'll help monitor the chat with that, but also if we could do sort of a wraparound with all the districts and, one piece of advice that you could leave participants with. And so as you're thinking about that, Mary's asking, or Mary was talking about progress monitoring with multilingual learners. Observation is huge, understanding where students are in both ELA and WIDA, So as Amber was mentioning, those summative assessments are huge because they can serve as an indicator. And then we heard throughout, it was a little implicit at times, but Janine does this really well in Cape Henlopen in mathematics and secondary, is to leverage those formative assessment opportunities where you're listening for the language, you're listening for the content, and you're helping to do that through tools such as, she mentioned Desmos. She has a beautiful way of utilizing technology in amplifying that for multilingual learners, and it really becomes alive. And then, of course, you saw examples of that at Red Clay, Christina, and CR as well. So any advice that you have for participants who are implementing high quality instructional materials in Delaware as they center their multilingual learners?
One piece of advice I would give is to bring all of the stakeholders to the table and to make sure the collaborations continue. You want to make sure teachers have a voice and they can share their concerns. And also they're bringing the perspective of their individual students to the table. So what a coach may have in mind for a classroom, the teacher is going to bring her specific concerns to the table. And then that's just a great way to collaborate and really get to more productive outcomes.
Melissa, one piece of advice that I think I would give is to remember that our teachers are just the same way as students are. And that sometimes we think, oh, I've taught them this in a PD already. What else do they need? But just like students, they need to hear things scaffolded. They need to hear things spiraled. They need to hear it over and over. So I feel like a lot of the conversations I've been having with teachers are like, oh yeah, I think I remember hearing about this before, but I'm glad you're bringing it back to me. So don't be afraid to say it again and again and again and again, because you really want them to be able to have it just down so it's internalized. So that would be my suggestion, is don't be afraid to say it again.
I agree with everything everyone said so far, but I also think that really listening to feedback is very important as well. Sometimes you might not necessarily see a challenge that's going to happen into a classroom when you're providing professional learning, but making sure that you are truly listening to what educators are saying for what they need help in, like what's working well. Is it something we can already build off of? But really listening to that feedback and not being scared to ask for it. Like everything's not going to be perfect. So just, being open to hearing that feedback.
And just adding on to that, I think educators learn from applying their knowledge, and that's when they need help, when they're actually using the tool with a student. And so layering in PD and coaching that is aligned, and really staying on top of where you are in the journey with that curriculum rollout, and where people are at. They may not be at the spot where you are looking at it from a 10,000 foot view. They're using it in the moment with lots of other factors going on. And so sometimes it's about taking steps backwards and thinking, okay, how can I support them here where their understanding is and where they're using it? So just keeping in mind that everybody's kind of rolling out the programs in their own way, at their own pace, and they need help when they're in the process of using it.
You bring up something so important, right? And I just wonder if this is part of the magic of implementation of high quality instructional materials in Delaware, is that everything heard thus far has really been job embedded. I hate to use that terminology. It sounds so like, I don't know, researchy or something, but that everybody's coming to the table with their expertise and their lens, as Natasha was saying just a moment ago as well. And you bring up that point, like it's applicable. it's not about coming in and saying, okay, now we're going to do something new and there's already a lot of noise, but let's look at what we have in front of us and apply all of the things that we have learned in this last decade, particularly over the last couple of years, and look at how that can serve our multilingual learners and each other. So when we think about this notion of survive to thrive, like pulling strategies out of everywhere is that survival version, where thriving is really being knowledgeable about the learners yourself, the learners you have in front of you, your materials, and then all of these other components that come into play that help each perspective in the system participate. And that everybody said it, it's kind of been implicit too, but that vulnerability of coming like, I might not know everything, right? You saw this, you heard this from CR and from Cape with the math, like, I'm new at this, I've been teaching math, but now I'm learning a different level of application. So I think there's really something there from this team to be job embedded, that it's right with the materials that you have in front of you every day, and that the architecture of those units of that curriculum and how you can leverage those pieces to meet your needs and help learners thrive. It's very powerful. All right, any closing thoughts? We are just coming to the end of this session, and want to make sure we're opening it up to people who might have questions, ideas, and then any final thoughts from the teams here.
I don't have any questions, but I'd like to give just some really quick feedback. As a 31-year core teacher, currently in my first year as an MLL teacher, I commend all of the presenters and the participants for your work thus far. I'm excited about it. It's much different from what I've been exposed to just in my very short time. And I'm excited for this to become pervasive and consistent, not just in the state of Delaware, but across the country. I'm wowed. So I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Wow. Just said thank you so much. That was such a powerful way of appreciating all of these wonderful colleagues. You said it the best. It's so true to watch these wonderful people in action and to know that their passion is translating into direct impacts for the system, for learners. It's really incredible. Agreed, Bryn, thank you for modeling the way. Thank you for encouraging the heart. Thank you for making sure that you're centering multilingual learners in this process. All learners will benefit from this process, and certainly we will break down the walls of marginalization. I love that slide that you had with the arrows. That made me think about new ways of thinking through collaboration. And as Maria Rodriguez would say, I think she's on this call sometime, this is not work to be done alone. And I think that is probably the most clear throughout each of the presentations that we saw today, was the way that you've worked through that collaborative structure, and you've moved along that collaboration continuum, and it's true co-laboring. It's not sharing, it's beyond sharing of ideas. It's how do we work together and do things differently for both parties involved. So, or all parties involved, I should say. Thank you, everyone. If there aren't any further thoughts, we will remain on here if you have extra questions and or anything that you want to share. And we have a really, really wonderful and exciting afternoon planned for you. So for now, big shout out to those who came to the table to share about their high quality instructional materials implementation, collaboration, centering of multilingual learners. You're all superstars, and we appreciate you very much. Thank you so much, and we will see you at our next session, the panel, Science of Reading panel. That should be exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.